I think that having unique, well-crafted and well thought out events are so important to fundraising, if not just for the fact that you can have a captive audience for so long and really engage with them in a different way, but being able to be in community together and to be with like-minded people, to hear stories, to feel impact is something that is never going to change.
Welcome to the Impact Roadmap, a podcast designed to give you the practical, concrete steps to grow your nonprofit or future-forward business in a sustainable way. I'm your host, Joey Goon. Let's get into the episode. So, Laura,
yes,
we've known each other for a long time.
Long time.
It's like 50 years.
50. Yes, I mean, it's amazing how well we've stayed.
We age well. Yeah. And look how good we look.
I know, right? For 50 some odd years, it's good.
And with kids.
Right. No gray hairs. We're all good.
So you're a fundraising extraordinaire.
Thank you.
Your background has been in fundraising.
Yes.
You were a CEO or executive director of the Epilepsy Foundation, right?
I worked for the Epilepsy Foundation for about 5 years. Became CEO in the fall of 19, right before the world was flipped on its head.
Are you an accidental fundraiser or did you know at a young age that you're like, this is what I want to do with my life? Yes
and no. I think I stumbled into it. And when I was in it, it was like, this is where I should have been the whole time. My generation, I don't consider myself to be old, but I am older. And when I was, going through secondary education, there weren't really degrees for nonprofit management. I didn't really know what that would look like. And so from the time I was a little girl, I wanted to be a lawyer. Just after I got through the ice skating phase and becoming a professional tennis player, I wanted to be the first female president, all of these things. Once I got kind of past those aspirations, I wanted to be a lawyer, and that I did mock trial. I did all of those things. And then in college, I started to question that my last year of my undergrad. And that's kind of a disheartening feeling after you spend a lot of time focusing on that and you don't have a backup plan. So before I dove into the expense and the time commitment of going to law school, I decided to get my feet wet as a paralegal, and it was not for me. I learned very quickly on that it was not for me. And my mom had actually found in the newspaper, bless her heart, she was still finding jobs in the newspaper because that was the time we were in. And she found this ad for an organization that was looking for someone who spoke French, which was my minor. We're in the Midwest. It's not that typical to find a job that requires or asks for someone who speaks French. So that kind of interested me right away. And that was how I fell into my first nonprofit job. I was at a local youth-based organization working with international development and the clubs that they had overseas, as well as our program department. And then as soon as I got into that work, I was like, this is where I'm supposed to be. I've always been very philanthropic. My parents instilled that in me at a young age. I just didn't know it was a career choice.
So what's your, so I have two follow-up questions to that. First of all, you said professional tennis player, and you also dabbled in ice skating?
Well, I mean, in my head, I dabbled in ice skating. I didn't actually do it.
Okay, gotcha.
Literally just went ice skating for the first time 3 weeks ago with my 11-year-old, and it was catastrophic. So why I thought I could be an Olympic ice skater, I don't know, but I sure thought I could be.
You're a dreamer.
I am a dreamer. Not a realistic one, but that's okay.
But then tennis.
I did love tennis.
Tennis was a thing.
I was not a good tennis player. Didn't do it competitively. Would go, hit the balls around with my parents. Once stuck my hand in a fire anthill while they were playing tennis. And that's about my memories of tennis. Again, why did I think I could do that? Now, I will say, third grade Laura, who thought that she could be the first female president, God love her. And I now that I'm older and wiser, I don't want to do that. But I have a teacher that I'm still really close with who was my teacher at that time. And she likes to remind me, remember, you said you were going to be the first female president. And I think that she's out there. It's just not me. But
question for you as a follow-up to that. At what point do you think we lose out that childlike wonder? And the wonder of having no inhibitions about what we can be and what we can do in our lives? Is there I
don't know. I kind of hope that we never lose that, right? I mean, I think I find myself still having those moments of what could I do, and I know in my heart that I can do anything I set my mind to. Maybe it's just more founded in reality. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like my youngest, who's 11, is still very much in that space, and maybe even to an extent my 15-year-old. But that's a great question, because I feel like that is something so pure and innocent that you don't want to lose.
Yeah.
But I find myself, with my oldest kind of cautioning him as he goes down his dreams, you can do anything you want, is it realistic?
Within reality.
Yeah. And I hate to discourage that because I really think that we should all hold on to that. But I would say for me, probably the awakening came, maybe middle school, high school. It's just the reality sunk in. It was like, okay. And I'm okay with it, but I'm not going to be an Olympic ice skater. I'm not going to be a professional tennis player. So, and it's fine.
It's like the notches in the tool belt. Like you start to get more life experience and, at some point it's like that, not the creativity gets stifled, but I think we get humbled and we start to realize what's pragmatic
exactly
in life.
Yeah.
But like you want to do that. And I know you're a leader now in your organization. You've been an executive director for an organization, led a fundraising team of individuals. And so like you've obviously taken this knowledge and this wisdom that you've cultivated over your professional life, and you've made it work for you in a different way. So you might not be a professional ice skater. You might not be an Olympic level tennis player, but you're an Olympian to your team and to the people that you serve.
Absolutely. I think that's a great way to frame it, and is how you can be that in your own personal life and going ice skating with my youngest for the first time. Like I wasn't going to get out there, and he did the first loop around and he's like, Mom, come out with me. And it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. I am not a professional, but I'm going to be this ice skater for my son. And like in that moment, you do feel like you're an Olympian. Cause like my son was so happy to be out there ice skating with me. I mean, it took us a very long time to get around that ice rink, but we did it and it was fun. So yeah.
I love it. Yeah. I have a mentor who's coached me in business, and he always says, what is the one thing that you want to be an Olympic level gold medal athlete in? Like, what is that? And I'd love to just phrase that as a question for you. Like, what is that thing for you? And maybe it is being a mom, because from what you've shared with us, even before we hit record and our conversation preparing for this last week, like your kids are very, like from what I hear, your kids are very lucky to have you.
Thank you.
As a mom.
Yeah. I think, for me, it's being the best mom that I can be for them. And also, I wish that we would offer, gold medals and things like compassion and empathy, right? Like, I think I see that in both my boys. I've said since he was born, my oldest is like the most empathetic, compassionate person I've ever met. And I think that serves him so well. And I think if we all were a little bit more empathetic and compassionate, like that's the gold medal I want to get, right? And I want to, or, being a great mom. And I do not mean to demean all the other gold medals that there are, because I think that those have their own merit. But let's talk about that more. Let's recognize that and recognize that not everyone is an athlete or, an intellectual. But like, let's get back to those core values, of empathy, kindness, compassion.
You mentioned a moment ago that your parents introduced you to philanthropy at a young age. Do you think that was maybe like a catalyst or a conduit for you, like becoming a more empathetic person? Like, what was that experience like?
I do think so. I think I give my mom and dad all the credit for that because, when my mom and I first moved here, we started volunteering at the Ronald McDonald house, and we'd go down one night a month and like make dinner in the kitchen for those families and talk about putting things in perspective, right? Like and in some ways that's hard to grapple, when I was 11, 12 years old. But then you realize like your world is so much bigger than your own. And I feel like our kids live in such a digital world that, plus or minus, however you want to look at that, I think there are both. Their worldview is so much more expanded. They have access to information and things that we didn't have access to as a kid that really broadens their worldview. So I think absolutely, my parents, I was in Girl Scouts and, was very involved in community and recognizing that, together we can build a better community. It doesn't lay on one person's shoulders. It's everybody working together for the greater good.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
That's really beautiful. I want to comment on Ronald McDonald because we were like very touched and moved. We actually all volunteered there and cooked.
Oh, awesome.
2 weeks ago.
Such a great organization.
We actually, we brought in this would be a shocker to you.
Okay.
We brought in our entire video team to the Ronald McDonald house because we wanted to deliver them content so that they could use it on their website, blogs, social media, however they wanted to repurpose it, of like us cooking and talking about our experience cooking and what that meant for us connecting with those families. It's like they're in the hospital all day long getting treatment. And the last thing that they need to do is come home and think about dinner and preparing a meal. There's a lot of time, effort, and energy that goes into just like thinking about what you're going to eat. And okay, we're privileged and it's like first world problems, right? Like, wow, what an inconvenience. We have to go think about what we're going to eat and go to the grocery store and make a meal and cook it. It's like, okay, when you say it that way, like we're all very fortunate that we have access to resources and to food and to grocery stores. But these families, you know, they don't have that same like experience on a daily basis. Right. They're thinking about, they're inside the four walls of the hospital. Absolutely. Is mom or dad going to make it? Yeah. What are we going to like? And so anyway, just to be in that environment and to be that like force of light for them, or that, you know, just to prepare, it seems so simple.
It does.
But to make them a meal, and just be there and to eat with them and connect with them. It's like, it was just an amazing experience for us as volunteers. So how do you go from, like, take us through the last couple of years of your life. Mm-hmm. Your first experience in nonprofit, you were a French translator, and now you are somewhere else. Like, what is that history, that backstory look like? How did you get from there to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's been an interesting journey. There've been a lot of forks in the road. My husband likes to tease me because, you know, there have been quite a few different companies and organizations, but it's really set me on the path and it's made me who I am today. So for me, I have done most everything you can think of in terms of nonprofit, from event planning to marketing to membership management, international relations. And for me, having that foundation of really the nuts and bolts of a foundation development department have led me to the place that I am now. You know, I understand the mechanics of what makes a good development department successful. And that really started from working as an administrative assistant and processing all the gifts that came in and helping with the acknowledgement process. I mean, that, while that sounds so mundane or simple, is so key in what we do, is being grateful and showing gratitude, and showing impact. That really helped me as I moved up in my career. You know, I think for me, when I became CEO, the stars aligned. I don't know if you had asked me then, and I'll fully admit now, I don't know that I thought I was ready for that. I knew I could do it. It was just something new to me, and I was ready for the challenge. I just think, you know, had I had a little bit of foresight and could see what was happening a few months later, maybe I would have changed my mind. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I would have liked the challenge, but it's been really important for me to see how all of those pieces work together. And I think what really led me to my current path was I was getting so far removed from that, being in the executive director role. You know, there's a lot that goes into that, from empowering and leading the team that I had, you know, helping them on their leadership journeys, managing the budget and the office and the board, and just being really pulled further away from that fundraising route, which I, of course, was still doing. I think any well-rounded, successful CEO or ED has to be a great fundraiser and recognize the value of that. But I just wanted to get back to my roots. And so that's kind of how I ended up where I'm at now. And I love what I'm doing. I'm doing more annual giving, working with women leadership and our young donors, like our Young Friends board. And it's where my heart's calling me. Well, it's where my heart called me, because that's where I'm at.
What is it? You said, excuse me, you said, you've really you understand what it takes to have a strong and thoughtful development process. And it's really all about, you know, showing appreciation and being grateful. What's the most interesting thing that's ever happened in your company in terms of like showing gratitude and affection and appreciation for a donor?
Mm-hmm. So when I was at an organization, we had a mid to high level donor society. And it was a very strategic and intentional program that paired a donor up with a student, which was really powerful. This organization worked with students from 9th grade up through and to college completion. And these donors sponsored students for at least 3 years. And so something that we did around Valentine's Day was hand-delivered all of these donors little pies from Pie Oh My. And I just, you know, it's like a great, you know, we were grateful for their sweetness, and, you know, we wanted to show them our love. And I just think things like that, you know, outside of the box. I have a mentor who always shared a story with me that really stuck with me, and a shout out to Linda for this story about a time where she worked, and I hope I'm not misparaphrasing this, but she worked for a school that had a phenomenal music program, and they had a donor who really loved the music program but wasn't as able to get to the performances. And so one day they gathered some of the best musicians and they did a little concert for him, like on his front porch, to say thank you. Like that sort of
That's
thing.
amazing.
Isn't it incredible?
That's incredible.
And that meant the world to him. And it's, I think as fundraisers, one of the best things we can do when we build that relationship with a donor is really find out what is meaningful to them, why they give, what drives their gifts, so that we can then properly, cultivate that relationship and let them be a part of that. I mean, I think as someone who loves music, if I were donating to a music program, I would love to see, the current program and have the kids come, the students come and play for me. So I think that, thinking outside the box and also being intentional and, thinking of those creative ways that maybe aren't as expensive or cost prohibitive, that's something that's important to a donor too.
We had our child at your hospital.
Yes.
And it was an incredible experience. It was like checking into the Ritz-Carlton from the arrival experience to the exit experience and everything in between. We felt like, honestly, I don't know. I don't have the personal experience of having our child at another hospital because we've only had one baby, but there's no other experience that I would never go anywhere else.
It's so beautiful. Well, and really that gives you the opportunity to focus on why you're there, right? You're right there. You're there for your daughter. Yeah. You don't need to be worrying about where you're parking or, you're checking in. Like you want to be there. It was about her.
It was about her.
I love that. Had such a good experience.
The doctors, the nursing staff, it was just incredible. And they came in, and just having like an empathetic witness, like somebody to walk in the room and say, hey mom, hey dad, like we know you love your baby. And like, that's awesome. You're holding her, but like, you need sleep. Yeah, like we got this. Yeah. We do this hundreds of times a week. Just trust us and let us let you have that space that you need right now, because you're going to have her the rest of your lives, which hopefully is a long time.
Yes.
God willing. But I just wanted to give a shameless plug to your hospital and your organization.
I appreciate that. It is an incredible place. Like it's a pillar of our community. I'm really blessed to be there. And I think, that compassionate care. And I know, Joey, you and I talked about this, that like healthcare is a right, not a privilege. Every person should have access to quality healthcare. And I feel like Mercy really is at the forefront of that, with our JFK clinic and just making sure that people get access to healthcare, whether that's pre-appointment, post-appointment. I mean, it doesn't stop once you get to the doctor's office. You have to make sure you have transportation to get your meds or to get to your follow-up appointment. And that's something that I think we really take to heart and focus on. So I'm glad you guys had such a good experience, because I think, that's a special moment, and I'm glad that it was amazing for you guys.
Absolutely.
Did you have that moment though when you get home? Because I did. The nurse that I had especially with my oldest, he was a little colicky. That woman was a saint. And I don't know what she did, but she sat there with my baby, had him in some kind of weird position on her lap and just tapped his bottom, and he slept. And I got home and I could not figure out where Nurse Kathy was and why she wasn't with me, because I didn't know how to do what she did. She like flipped him over. And he's fine. Obviously he's 15, but I don't know if you had that, oh God moment when you get home and you're like, wait, where are all the nurses? Like I need them here.
It's a pretty surreal experience.
Yeah.
You get home, you're like, okay, now we're responsible for this
for the rest of their life. Yeah. It is
this little human.
Overwhelming.
It is.
But it's amazing, but it's overwhelming. But I'm here to tell you almost 16 years later, it's worth it. But those first couple of years.
Mercy even sends you home with like a packet with QR codes that you can scan. And it's like, hey, if your baby is choking, here's how to give CPR. By the way, if you have questions about lactation, scan this QR code, watch this quick video. Our lactation consultant's going to take you through like the 3 or 5 things that you need to know about promoting.
Yeah. I love that.
Promoting breast milk. And it's just that, to have that repository of just information at our fingertips it's just brilliant.
That is amazing.
Everything that Mercy does is it's super thoughtful and patient centric.
It is. And it's really at the forefront, just trying to make sure that we are giving that positive patient experience and that you do have that information, because I think anytime you're in the hospital, whether it's for a wonderful thing like a childbirth, there still is a lot of information to process, and you're not necessarily in the right headspace to do so, whether it's sleep deprivation or worry or an anxiety. So to be able to provide those resources after the fact so that you have them is great.
So all of this to come back to the initial point, which is it's like way easier to advocate for a third party than it is to advocate for your own business, because you're so close to the fire. Great. Like I know, I'm like, wow, we've helped, over 300 nonprofits raise more than $50 million in generosity over the last 10 years. Awesome. And so, even saying that, there's a sense of like imposter syndrome and like, it's like, but we can do more and we need to serve more people anyway. So it's like you start to overanalyze and process when you're so close to the fire.
Agreed.
And, I think that's hard for all of us as business leaders, because we want people to believe in our missions. We want people to like understand the value that we're creating on the planet. But then it's like, how do you articulate that and communicate it in a way that's effective so people can connect to it? And that's tough, right?
It is tough. And I think there's always this push and pull too of like, and this was something when I was CEO at the Epilepsy Foundation was, I don't need to be the one that's speaking all the time about our organization. I can, and sometimes it would default to me and I was comfortable with it, but it's like, people don't need to hear from me. They need to hear from the clients that we're serving and our program staff. I mean, these are the people that are out there doing the work. These are the ones you should be talking to. I'm happy to talk, but you really have to get to the root and the heart of what your mission is. And sometimes it is hard to remove yourself from that. And I think sometimes it's almost harder to do that, right? Like when we think about being overworked and under-resourced, it's like, well, maybe it's just easier if we do the talking, but I think you're missing an opportunity then to really get to the heart of it and to share your story in a well-executed way.
Yeah. What role do events play in your fundraising strategy at Mercy?
Yeah, so they are a big part of it. I think the difference between Mercy and my previous organization is that our fundraising events, they complement and they are a large part of what we do, but my previous organization events were almost all of our entire, generated revenue. There was some annual giving, but it was predominantly events, and that can be hard for a small nonprofit. So Mercy, we have two big events. We have our Mercy Masquerade, which we just had earlier in March, and that benefits our JFK clinic for underserved and underinsured patients, and then our Benefit for Kids, which really supports our young adult and adolescent program. And so those events are they're very fun. And it's a great way to share some of those stories on a bigger level with that group of donors. And I think, I think events get a lot of flack. You probably know that just as well as I do. I think people, whether they're fundraisers or event attendees, often have a love-hate relationship with them. The fact of the matter is events are a part of fundraising, and they're a very good part of fundraising, right? It gives you an opportunity to connect with a bigger group of your donors in one space and to tell, authentic stories. I just think that people have to reframe their views on events. And I think especially post-pandemic, there's been a shift, and I'm sure you guys have seen it. I'm struggling as an event participant and as someone who does this in her work life. Virtual events, there was a plus to them and there was a negative to them. But I think that having unique, well-crafted and well-thought-out events are so important to fundraising. If not just for the fact that you can have a captive audience for so long and really engage with them in a different way. I think having a one-on-one with someone is powerful, but being able to be in community together and to be with like-minded people, to hear stories, to feel impact is something that is never going to change.
How do you bring that out in your events? How do you bring out that like deeper sense of connection and community?
I wish I had a really good answer for that. At Mercy, I'm lucky to work with a great team who kind of help foster that. But I think one of the things with our event, our Mercy Masquerade in particular, and I can't remember if I was sharing this with you earlier, but there is actually not a large ask at that event at all. There's no auction. There's no fund need. There is a soft ask, and there are pledge cards around the room. But really, that event is meant to celebrate the work that we've done and celebrate our sponsors. And it's just a fun event. And I think there's a difference, especially when you're dealing with sponsors, to say, hey, invite your employees. Use this as a celebration. We're not going to be, people like to say, shaking them down for money. That's not what we do, but that's what the perception is. They're there to have a good time. And this year it was Western themed, and it was, there was a honky tonk and a saloon, and it was great food, great people. for a great mission. And I didn't really answer your question, did I?
No, I think it's great. Like what you're saying is you're celebrating your victories.
Yeah.
You're celebrating these milestone moments. Mm-hmm. Isn't it so freaking true in business that we get so focused on the next mountaintop and the next goal that we forget to stop? And I'm a hypocrite. Like Lachlan, who's our amazing project manager, will tell you, like, we need to do a better job of stopping to appreciate the little victories along the way. Yep. And it sounds like that's exactly what this event does for you and your attendees.
And I think that it's important to do that internally too, right? So like we were kind of joking when I first got here, and I anointed all of your staff saints, because they truly are. And I don't mean that to be like blasphemous, but take that as what you will. But my boss at Mercy, our leader, Gina, has done a phenomenal job of celebrating our successes. I think everyone can say that their line of work is hard, but I think, we are in very difficult industries. Fundraising is hard. Event planning, production is difficult. We have a crown in our office, and we pass the crown around. We're about half of us love it, and the other half are happy to just put it on our desk. This girl wore it all day the day she got it, because why wouldn't I wear a crown? I love a good crown. And it's really tied back to one of our key mission priorities in charism. And that charism really, I can't articulate it as well as Gina did, but I have it hanging up in my office. Just really reflects what we do as fundraisers and what we do as employees of Mercy. And so we self-nominate amongst our team every week. And they can be anonymous or not. And then we just celebrate each other and pass the crown around. And I think like you have to do that. So pass the crown, so to speak, externally too, right? I mean, I think, and that's not to say like you don't share the challenges. I mean, there are certainly challenges in healthcare right now and in fundraising, and you don't want to gloss over that, but let's also celebrate where we've come and what we've been able to do in a really, really difficult time. And here's how we're moving forward and hoping to overcome those challenges. So for sure.
And my hypocrite, like I mentioned a moment ago, there's some hypocrisy. It's that it's not with the team. I'm not like always pushing the team for more. I'm pushing myself.
Yeah. It's that internal push. Do you find that that's changed after the pandemic?
I think it's gotten more intense.
Really?
Yeah, that's because like the pandemic, there were so many nonprofits who needed us. And when the pandemic was as terrible a thing as it was for humanity, it was like the biggest catalyst for our growth as an organization, because we were at a time where we were an event production and video production company. We knew how to broadcast and we knew how to produce media. And so we had all these nonprofits whose fundraising events effectively stopped. Yeah. And they're like, well, we still need to be able to provide for our recipients and pay our staff and provide our programs. And we don't have the means to be able to bring that money in, the resources to be able to do so. And we're like, well, we can help you.
Yeah.
And so we actually, the world stopped on March 20th. We produced our first virtual gala that following weekend.
Wow.
And when we did it, the organization raised 100% more money virtually than they did the year before in an in-person setting. So we called up our dear friends over at One Cause. Steve Johns, the CEO over there, was actually on our podcast a couple of weeks ago. It was a super cool interview. And we said, hey, we think we have something here. Yeah. We worked with you on this event. Let's supplement and synergistically come together and do webinars and like teach people how to do this. And so we went from having 15, 20 nonprofit clients to 200 plus nonprofit clients overnight. And so now that pressure, because more people are relying on us and we have to continue to innovate and iterate and like be able to deliver value to them.
Sure.
It's a lot, but it's also, I wouldn't have it any other way, because we're doing it for nonprofits and they're helping the world become a better place. Like I wouldn't choose to work with any other group of organizations. Yeah. Like nonprofits is like, that's where our hearts are. And we still do the corporate multinational conferences and the summits and the workshops. But like when we get to work with a nonprofit, we really dig deep and get involved in the mission so that we can help them go further faster.
Yeah. Well, I just have to give you guys so much kudos because, I think that there were a lot of very well executed virtual events. I don't think that the ones that I was helping were, because I was navigating a lot. And I feel like you guys really took that uncertainty and the unknown and really thrived and really pushed yourself forward into that. And I remember watching kind of, because you worked with our AFP local chapter, shout out to the Association of Fundraising Professionals, another huge part of my professional growth, but really working with AFP that year on our virtual events. And it was really amazing to see what you guys were doing, because events are hard regardless, but then when you're trying to do them virtually, we had to cancel our gala that was supposed to be on March 13th. I had gone on a business trip to DC the weekend before we went into lockdown, and there was like some hand sanitizer and like Lysol wipes and maybe one person on the plane with a mask. And then we got our first case in St. Louis, like when I got back, and it was March 10th. And like my staff's asking me, my board's asking me like, are we going to have this gala on the 13th? And I'm like, it just did not seem like the prudent thing to do. And we ended up not doing our first. We had a couple galas that spring and races. We didn't do our first ones until the fall. It just took me that long to personally process what was happening. I mean, it was a lot to navigate, and we were a smaller organization, and we had a little bit of luxury of time, not a ton, but I think to have you guys as a resource is invaluable in our community.
Well, we appreciate that. For us, it was evolve or die. Really,
yeah.
If we hadn't have figured that out, we would no longer be a company.
That's so true.
We would no longer be viable and around. And so like our level of uncertainty was high, but we embraced the challenge, and we were rewarded because we helped so many groups. And I think what like the technology unlocks something in like how we view events now. Like we did an event for an organization out of Atlanta.
Okay.
And in the past they couldn't bring their recipients into the room because they serve kids in Nepal. So we used the technology to bring the kids in Nepal into Zoom breakout rooms and had a facilitator and a translator in the breakout rooms so they could have conversations with the donors online could have conversations with these recipients in Nepal before we went into the program.
That's amazing.
And so now we're like, okay, cool. How can we do that in a live setting?
Yeah.
And now we could bring those kids in Nepal onto our screens, iPads at the tables, bring microphones to the tables, have real time interactions with these kiddos in a physical space where everyone's together. And like, so now the technology's serving us tenfold.
Oh yeah.
And it's just like, how did we not know this? Like, we didn't know this before. We just stumbled into it.
We did. And it came out of necessity, right?
It did.
I mean,
necessity is the mother of invention. Is that right?
It is. And I feel like as long as I've known you, like you thrive on that. And I applaud that and admire that so much in you. I kind of crumbled a little bit. I was like stumbled a little bit in the beginning of the pandemic. But I mean, I think about even in our personal lives, we were able to have my grandmother, my last surviving grandparent lives in New York. And, we do phone calls. We started having like Zooms on Thanksgiving morning, and it's like my cousin in Colorado and my aunts and uncles there, and my other cousin in DC. And it was like, why didn't we think about having Zooms with grandma before?
The technology was there.
It was there.
We just weren't like, leveraging it in the way that
said Zoom. I mean, now it is like, even in my office, I'll be like,
hey, I'm not going to
Teams. I'm just going to talk right here.
Like you guys are like all the way down, you've got your own calendar, you're down the hallway, you've got other meetings. Like, so let's just jump on. It's convenient.
So much easier.
The world is so connected now.
It is, which is cool. I mean, it is cool. I think for me, the biggest shock going back to work. So when I was at the Epilepsy Foundation, I was remote for the last few years. It didn't make sense for us to have our office space anymore, financially. So like going back to the office, it was like, oh man, I have to like find things to wear from the waist down that are like business appropriate. Cause like
on Zoom, you wear no pants.
Well, I mean, I wear pants. Let's be clear. I wore yoga pants, but a nice top and then like sweats or something on the bottom. And I was like, oh, right. I need like nice pants and stuff. So it's been a little bit of a shift. Or like you see people in person now and you're like, wow, you are so much taller than I thought, because when I saw you in this box, you seemed not as tall.
You were just torso.
We were just torso. And, but I mean, I do. There's so much humor that came out of Zoom meetings. I mean, without fail, every Zoom meeting I was on, there was either a cat, a dog, or a child that would pop up. You saw it last week with me. You see a little floating head over here. It's like, oh, don't worry, it's just my kid.
And he was awesome.
I know. He says hi, by the way. He was going to come, and then he's like, oh, I don't know, because it's a little much for him, I think. But he's like, was that with Joey? So he says hi.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah.
He remembered me?
He did. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. They're good kids.
Huh. That's awesome.
Yeah, I just figured there's a lot of stuff he could get into trouble in here. So
you'll have to bring in your older son.
I know.
Tell me your older son's name.
Nick.
Okay, it's Jackson and
Jack and Nick. Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Jack's my little guy, and then Nick. And yeah, Nick. This would be Nick's world. He'd love this.
Yeah, we'd love to bring him on set. One of our events.
And I told you, Jack's big thing is he wants to be a YouTuber, and I'm like, again, we're still in that kind of age of like, there's nothing wrong with being a YouTuber at all. I just, he would love this too. I told him, I said, I'm going to be on a podcast, buddy. He's very excited.
So we talked a moment ago about like risk.
Yeah.
And maybe this could be like the thing that we leave.
Okay.
Like, like we kind of like close the episode.
Sure.
You do the like closing the impact loop in nonprofits. We're closing the episode loop here, talking like leaving on a high note of leadership.
Okay.
So you talked a moment ago about like people's tolerance for risk and willingness to embrace uncertainty. How do you, like, you were a CEO, executive director, you're now a frontline fundraiser working on the advancements that, like, you got to get uncomfortable, or I'm sorry, you have to be comfortable getting uncomfortable. So are there things you do on a daily basis to like practice being uncomfortable, like jumping out of a plane or Wim Hof ice baths? Are you really?
Uh-huh. I'm saying this now. I'm talking to my friend Laura, one of my best friends. We were supposed to do this last year for our 40th. So I just aged myself, but it's all good. 40 is the new 20.
It really is.
So we're going on June 9th, Skydive St. Louis.
First time?
Yeah.
Oh man. No, I have not. I'm not.
I feel like I will be fine until I get, so that's one way I'm testing my uncomfortableness this year. We've always said it was on our bucket list. And when we were 37, I was like, let's do it when we're 40, kind of pushing it off a few years, but here we are. That's happening.
Good for you.
Yeah. It's been on my bucket list for a long time. I think I need to be better about practicing that on a daily basis. I think where I struggle with that is how that impacts others, right? So like during the pandemic, in the height of the pandemic, like God, those first like March, April 2020, I'm navigating my own internal thoughts and fears and concerns and anxieties. I'm trying to manage my kids' fears and anxieties and concerns. I'm trying to manage the staff, like, are we going to be able to keep our doors open? And that was a lot for me to take in. And I felt that I had to be, there was a fine line of being vulnerable and honest. I needed to make sure that I was managing my fears in a way that wasn't transcending to other people that were in my orbit, because it was such an uncertain time. I mean, obviously that's an extreme case, and God willing, we won't have to deal with that again. But I think I learned a lot from that process. Personally, a couple things besides jumping out of a plane that I've done to kind of tap into my discomfort. Right after Jack was born, I started a running journey and have done 5 half marathons. It's been a while. Well, I have not run recently, mostly because I keep getting sick. But I never thought I would be a runner. I thought people were crazy who went running. I was the kid, in PE who, when the gym teacher wasn't looking, I was walking, and it wasn't until they looked at me and yelled at me that I started running. And for me, it was always a mind over matter thing. My brain gave out long before my legs would. My brain would just shut down and be like, you can't do this. And my legs were like, hey, we're still going. And so I used that, and I need to get back to that girl who's, fearless and does that thing. But that's when I really learned. And I was 30, 31. I can do anything I put my mind to. But sometimes putting my mind to it is hard. So I need to get back to that. And I've not been good about that, leaning into that discomfort. But it's okay. I'm okay with that.
You're taking a transformational step in your journey by jumping out of a plane on June 9th. I
got to tell you, my older son and I were in California a few weeks ago, and we were in the plane, in the Southwest plane. Now in the app, you can track like all the cool flight stuff for like nerds, like how fast you're going, which is crazy. And I literally looked at our flight app as we were at 10,000 feet, which is, by the way, how high you go to jump out of a plane. And I looked out the window and I was like, oh, this is a lot higher. I think I will be fine until the moment they open that door, and then he's going to have to push me out. It's fine, but I'll do it. And I'm going to keep my eyes open, I think. And I'm going to get video of it. They say it's addicting. Lachlan, they say it's like tattoos. Once you jump out of a plane, you want to do it again. So
it's the adrenaline, the epinephrine, the dopamine. My yoga teacher says the dopamine is the I accomplished something chemical.
Yeah.
So you do something and like you expand your edge.
Okay.
Right. And so, I mean, the thing with planes is like, you're taking your edge so far.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the law of diminishing returns in a sense, right? Like,
right.
Because you're stretching that edge so far, now it's like you've got to push it even further to get that next hit of dopamine. Where do
you go from there? I mean, that's my limit. I don't know that I'm gonna be doing anything else. Like,
how do you go higher than that?
I don't know, but I didn't think about that.
You're setting the bar really high.
Well, I got to.
You just have to jump out of a plane again, and maybe next time it's 15,000 feet.
15. Well, I had to tell you, and again, I'm speaking all of these things into existence. And I just had a conversation with my son about this, as he's like eyeing going to USC in a few years. I was like, you got to speak it into being. I've not actually put this to paper, but I know it's cliche, but we watched the Bucket List movie, Jack Nicholson. And
Such a
Morgan
great
Freeman.
movie.
It's a great movie. And I have some pretty far-fetched things, like jumping out of a plane. I also really want to go cage diving with great whites.
Ooh.
I'm in a cage. They can't hurt me. I mean, so I'm just speaking all these things into existence. Like, I don't know that I'll ever, well, I'm not going to say that. That's what I want to do. So after planes, it will be swimming with sharks.
I love how you swallowed that. And you're
I did.
You know what? I'm going to do it.
Yeah,
You're manifesting it.
I'm going to manifest it. I'm not going to say it's not going to happen. So, it'll go down in a book. I have a book somewhere that I'll write it down in. And I want to see all 50 states, which I'm pretty close to, go back to Paris. There's like smaller things, but the plane, jumping out of a plane and cage diving is the two kind of extremes.
Really cool.
I'll let you know on June 10th. How cool it is.
Yeah, please report back.
I will.
Alive.
I will. Yeah, I'll let you know. Notice how I said I was like, yeah, I'll report back on June 10th, God willing.
If there's a just a couple last questions. If there's a fundraiser out there right now that's struggling, what would you say to them?
Don't give up. Find those resources that are in our community. I think you and I were talking last week that St. Louis is an incredibly philanthropic community from the organizations. I mean, you were talking about working with hundreds of nonprofits. We have so many great organizations doing great things and very philanthropic donors. With that, we have resources like Utopia or the Association of Fundraising Professionals or the Grants Professional Associations. Like, don't hesitate to reach out. I have never felt a sense of competition amongst other fundraisers in this community. It has always been one of support and brainstorming, whether it's reaching out to me or somebody else, another fundraiser that, I think having those, we talked about this a lot in a women's leadership group I was in with Focus. Shout out to Focus St. Louis for offering great leadership programs. Talking about your personal inner board of directors, those people that you can reach out to, whether it's you need a hype person or you need someone who's a little bit more realistic, like maybe, Laura, you shouldn't jump out of a plane. Having all that representation on your personal board of directors. So, if you're struggling, find those people that have similar positions at other organizations that you can run ideas off of. Just don't give up. I think this is a hard industry, and there used to be an anecdote, and forgive me because I don't know if it's still accurate, where, the tenure for a development person was like 18 months, which is unreal. It takes a full year to get to know an organization, the full cycle, and the fact that we were having such turnover. I think it's gotten better. I don't think it's 18 months anymore, but if this is where your heart is at, keep at it and just find those shiny moments where and like for me, if it's for me and I'm at the hospital, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go walk the walls of the hospital. If I'm having a rough day and I'm going to see like, this is the impact of our work, and so I would just encourage you, if you're able to get up and
get reconnected with the
reconnected
why.
For sure. And if you can't have that, if you don't have that ability, connect with one of your favorite donors and just get together with them and just be reminded about why you do what you do.
That's such great advice.
I think it brings us back in coming off of a year where you couldn't see people. I live off of that. Like, I love seeing people. And so for me, if it's just having coffee with a board member or a donor and just being like, seeing them excited about the mission always, is contagious. So.
Yeah, and this doesn't just go for fundraisers. This goes for anybody out there in business.
Amen.
Like anybody.
Yeah.
Don't give up. Give yourself some grace.
You got to, and it's easy for me to say that as someone from the outside, but put one foot in front of the other and just keep going.
Love it. Well, this has been a
awesome.
very full episode.
It has been
lots of joy. I can see why you're so effective at what you do. You're just a very empathetic, heart-centered person. You're super charismatic.
Thank you.
And very, very humble and grounded, which is awesome because I know how successful you are in your role. And you bring such humility and such grace.
Thank you.
So thank you for everything that you do to serve the planet and the community.
Yeah. And you too. It's just crazy. I remember when I first met you and your dad a long time ago. And I just love to see what you guys have built and how you're helping the community. It's awesome.
Thank you so much.
I know your mom's watching down. Your mom's smiling.
I appreciate that. It's really cool too to be a part of this and to have like mom's legacy riding on my shoulders. Or I'm riding on the shoulders of her legacy.
Yeah.
Because her legacy riding on my shoulders, that seems like very overwhelming. That's a heavy,
right.
Yeah, that's a lot. But that's a heavy thing to carry. But I get to ride on the shoulders of her legacy, which seems a much more uplifting.
It does, and she would be so damn proud of you. I know that she would be.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
You have to tell your dad I said hi. Hi, Neil.
Hey, if this episode was valuable to you, then share it with someone that you love, someone that you know that could benefit from it. Also, be sure to subscribe, and depending on how you're listening, go ahead and leave a comment or review. This will help ensure that we are connecting with other nonprofit leaders so that we can get this critical information out to them. And if your company is in the early or even late stages of putting on an event, go to our website, utopiaexperience.com, and click the Book Us tab and schedule a free discovery call to see if our services would be a right fit for your event. And even if they're not, that's okay. I promise you our expertise can steer you in the right direction, so you'll get value either way. Thanks for listening to the Impact Roadmap, and we'll see you next time.